Hi everyone, my name's Emma. Today we are talking about feminism. When it comes to choices and decisions, the ones that we make with more intention will help us create the world that we want to live in. That's what we talk about here on this channel. How can we take our power back every single day through making more empowered decisions? Feminism was attributed to have started in 1792 when Mary Wollstonecraft released her book, The Vindication of the Rights of Women. And in her book, she did a very important thing that projected the continuation of feminism, the direction of feminism, and it still affects feminism today. She said that the women that she was talking about, the women that she was fighting for, was middle-class white women. She said that they need to be equal to the white men in society. She defined what is male, what is female, by subsequently defining what is a man and what is a woman. Her piece of writing is one of the most important because of the division and the divisiveness that she created within the movement from her very first introduction of feminism. Later on, when Mary Prince released her slave narrative, she was the first woman to do so. On the front cover, there is an image that says, am I not a sister? Am I not a woman? And if we look at the definition that Mary Wollstonecraft created, the answer would be no. And because of that, we can start to understand how society created feminism to be so separate, to say, oh, feminism is for white women and not for any other race. And that is why there has been so many waves of feminism to address this, to talk about this, to say she did this really important thing that created this divide between people, between women that need to stand together and be empowered, empower one another. She created this division, and that division continued for so long. In 1920, when the suffragettes were advocating for the rights of women and women got the right to vote, that right was not easily and freely handed to every woman. And the importance of talking about this is to put into context what has happened at the start of movements and how they have evolved. Women have achieved a great deal within feminism, whether it's in this country or in other places in the world. There is a lot of things to continue to need to be done. Many women across the world do not have the same rights that they do in America or in other European countries, and feminism is trying to bring that equality, that respect, that acceptance to women of all races across all countries. And if we are just saying or acting as if feminism has always been inclusive, we are not being authentic to what originally happened. And if we don't understand history, it's going to keep repeating itself. There's going to continue to be this divisiveness, this separation, this division that has never helped the movement. And Frederick Douglass was a big proponent of abolitionism and feminism. He believed the movements really needed to work together because they were fighting for the same thing. And he has always been an advocate for working together and to come together as a bigger group to stand up and say, hey, we deserve to be listened to. And because of that, he was at the Seneca Falls Convention, he gave a speech there, and then he created an organization that actually did combine abolitionism and feminism, but it was disbanded, it fell apart because of how many people at the time believed that those two had nothing to do with each other. Which then asks the question, so how were people who were previously enslaved continued to be looked at in society? How is that view continuing to be exploited today, and how is that affecting 100 years later? And that is a big part of what I want to talk today, is to say the choices and decisions we make today about how we talk in movements, how we talk about what's going on in the world, what we're saying, what we're doing, it's going to have this long-lasting effect that is not something that has always been thought about. When world wars were started, when racism, when segregation, when slavery was started, there wasn't this thinking in the future, how is this going to be affecting people in the long term? And this lack of projecting into the future and understanding what choices we're making is affecting people then, it's definitely not something that people are doing to see how it's affecting people right now. And that's a big problem today as well. We don't necessarily even have to be projecting how are we affecting the future, how are we affecting the current present, and that's also not something that's talked about. And in order for us to be able to project into the future and see, oh, this is happening, this shouldn't be happening, this might happen, we have to be fully aware of what's going on right now. And to be fully aware of what's going on right now, we need to be fully aware of what has happened so far. So there is this progression of learning from our past, learning what was done, what has been done, and then understanding that if we don't learn about it, it will continue that way. Because history does repeat itself. We can see it through all civilizations. A lot of history continues to repeat as if people are not learning these lessons, yet they are trapped by the past because they are living by the standards that the past choices created. And if we are going to continue this way of not being held accountable for what is currently happening, we're going to force future generations to live by the decisions that we make, which is a big part of what people are advocating for within climate change and with saying that we need to think about future generations. But in order for us to think about future generations, we have to think about current people, about what's happening to people right now. And in order for us to truly understand why they're in those situations, we have to go even further back and understand history. We need to repeat history so history doesn't repeat itself, because it will continue and this will continue to happen. If we don't address why feminism has so many different ways, why what happened has happened, if we don't look at those hard truths, if we're like, I don't want to talk about it, I just want to blame people, or I don't want to take responsibility, it's not my fault, we're continuing to miss the point of we need to address what happened in order to understand where we're going to continue if we don't. Because throughout history, that's what has happened. We have ignored the past, ignored what was happening, and been so confident in saying, oh, it doesn't matter, it's in the past, and we aren't understanding how it's affecting us. Some people are very aware of how the past is affecting them, and it shouldn't be forced on one part of the population to be dealing with the past while other people are benefiting from it. And the people who are perceived to be benefiting from it are not actually fully benefiting from it either. They are being hurt by it. It is just seemed to be hurting them in a way that seems to be benefiting them. If we lived in a society where women had access to the education, to the resources that they needed, and if all races had equal and adequate resources that they needed, we would live in a world where people had the ability to have ideas, to create art, to create entertainment, to create technology. We would be living in a much better world. When we live in areas that is actually combined of various groups of people, we live in a much better world, not because it just seems like the right thing to do, but actually psychology has proven that if there's people of various races working in a group together, it holds people accountable for their ideas, and they're not just so willing to say, hey, like, I'm just going to agree with the masses. It makes people think for themselves because they aren't relying on people who look like them to understand what they're saying, or something along those lines. So we are not living in the world that we want to, but we have to understand how this world was created first if we have any hope of changing it. So being a feminist today, being an activist today, you need to understand in what context the world was created in order to project into the future of what we hope that it looks like. And that is difficult. It is hard to look at it and be like, wow, this was actually something that was happening. Yes. And understand that when you look at just one resource, that is not enough perspective to understand the past. We need to be reading more. We need to be looking at more videos. We need to be having these conversations. Every person that you talk to, every person you interact with, there is something to be learned there. We need to continue to learn. We need to continue to be wary of what's going on in the world, to be observant, and to be adding helpful information, adding important conversation and moments and movements, and to not be blaming one another. The culture that we live where we're not allowing people redemption is creating this constant of, oh, we're not supposed to talk about the past because that was just wrong. And because we're doing that to people, we're doing that to history, we're doing that to the world, and then we're not able to overcome it, and we're wondering why we're not overcoming and moving past things if we just say, oh, this person messed up, he's not allowed to be here anymore, he shouldn't be saying anything, get him off the platform. It doesn't allow people to take responsibility for what they said and to give them the ability to create redemption for what they said and to say, you know what, this is where I stood for so long, this is what is actually right, and I understand that now, and I want to help with making that what I understand is right now a bigger part of this world. If we continue to cut people off from conversations, if we don't involve them, if we just point fingers, if we just shift blame and shift responsibility to somebody else instead of being accountable for what we say and what we do, we've all made mistakes. We all have a history that is not filled with, I was perfect in every single step that I took. We all need to be held accountable and responsible, and then we need to be allowed to move forward from it. We need to learn the lessons of the past, of our own past, and to say, you know what, I choose to do better, because it is that choice that is the difference between what has been happening and what will happen and what can happen. But if we don't acknowledge what has been happening in history and feminism and every single movement that is happening, and understand that all these movements are really fighting for the same thing, which is what Frederick Douglass said. He was always ahead of his time. He said we all need to work together and overcome this together. And we need to do that if we want to have any hope of changing the outlook of the world. Whatever story has happened, we've inherited, but we need to understand it if we want to change it. And that's the thing. If we want to let go of our past, we need to understand what happened, learn those lessons, move on. We can't keep just forgetting or trying to forget, claiming we're forgetting and we're not, and now the past is continuing to come up in ways that we don't know how to deal with it because we're just not addressing it directly. We need to confront those fears of looking at what has happened and to deal with them and then move on. Do something with it. That is what we need to do. And we have to first start by knowing what's going on, and that is what we have to do. We can all do it. We can all be that change we want to see in the world. We just have to start off with that very important thing of choosing to do it. So, what are you going to choose? So the choice is yours. It always has been. Hope you got something out of today's video. Thank you for being here with me. I hope to see you soon, but until then, I hope that you have an amazing day.